All right, let's dive right in. In this explainer, we're going to walk through the documented events of a specific market cycle for the Dow Jones 30, also known as the DJ30. We'll be looking at this cycle with the ID DJ30_1_2, and we're going to view it entirely through the lens of the market DNA model.
So, here's our roadmap. First, we'll break down the complete entry plan as it was designed in Phase 1. Then, things get a little interesting. We're going to jump ahead to Phase 3, because that was actually the first major event to happen. After that, we'll circle back to Phase 2 to get a handle on the cycle's current status. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with a quick summary and some really important disclaimers.
Okay, so first up, Phase 1, the entry plan. Now, this is crucial. Everything you're about to see was documented back on February 23, 2026. That's before any of this started to play out in the market. This gives us the original blueprint for the entire strategy.
Take a look at this chart. This is a snapshot of the exact market conditions on that setup day. You can see the model identified a very specific geometric structure, and right there, at that point labeled M, that was the planned primary entry point.
Now let's dig into the numbers that built this whole plan. The strategy had a primary entry at M and also a potential secondary entry at a level called P of C. Average those two and you get a mean entry right around 48,506. But the real foundation of the plan rested on two other key parameters, a trapezoid time duration of 33 days and a risk coefficient of 2.
So, how does this translate into an actual trade? Well, the model works everything out using a hypothetical capital of $100,000. The plan had a strict maximum drawdown of 5%, or $5,000. You take all those parameters we just looked at, crunch the numbers, and it generates a calculated trade size of 0.07 for each entry.
And just so there's no mystery about where that number comes from, the documentation lays it out perfectly. I'm going to read this quote directly. Both trade sizes are calculated using the hypothetical capital, the investor's maximum allowed drawdown, the third triangle domain percentage, the risk coefficient, and the contract size.
So, we have our entry plan. What about the exits? The model set 3 crystal clear price targets from the very beginning. T1, which is the mirror level, was at 49,104. T2, at a point called Apex N, was sitting at 49,629. And the big one, T3, the trapezoid top, was set way up at 50,160.
All right, now things get really interesting. The very first major event to actually happen in the market corresponds to what the model calls Phase 3, or the N event. Yep, it happened before Phase 2 was even a factor. Let's see exactly what went down. And here it is. This is the chart from February 26th. You can see just 3 days after the plan was documented, the price shot right up and tagged that Apex N level. And if you remember, that was our T2 price target, right on the money.
Now, because the price hit that N level first, it triggered what the documentation calls the alternative scenario path. This single event basically set the rules for how the rest of the cycle was going to be managed.
So, the N event occurred, but of course the market kept moving. This brings us to the documentation of Phase 2, which covers the cycle's journey all the way up to the current status on April 17, 2026.
This chart really tells the whole story so far. You can trace the path perfectly, from the initial entry at up to that N event we just talked about, which was followed by a pretty significant drop, and then a period of recovery. Let's walk through the play-by-play. First, the position opened at M. Then, once the price hit the N target, half of the positions were closed. After that, the price fell, which actually allowed the position to be refilled at that P of C level. From there, the price kept dropping to a low of 44,811 before it finally turned around, reversed course, and climbed all the way to the T1 target. That moment marked the completion of Phase 2.
And here's a key detail on the timing. Remember that 33-day trapezoidal time window from the initial plan? Well, the documentation notes that the completion of Phase 2, that moment the price hit T1, happened 18 days after that time window had already expired.
So with Phases 1, 3, and 2 all documented, the cycle is now at a fascinating point. And this leads to the one big, open-ended question posed in the documentation. Will the next phase be Phase 4? We don't know. The model simply continues to observe. Okay, to wrap things up, let's just quickly go over the purpose of all this and cover some very important disclaimers.
Please, please keep these points in mind. This is all part of a public model documentation. It is absolutely not financial advice. The model's framework prohibits any leverage above 10, and it is critical that you never, ever invest essential personal funds. And finally, just to be crystal clear, we are only describing visible recorded events. There are no references to any kind of technical, fundamental, or quantitative analysis here.
And that is a wrap on our documentation of cycle DJ30_1_2. If you want to see more documented cycles like this one, you can always visit the website at marketdnaedge.com.
Thanks for tuning in.